Hello, everybody. Glad we're all here today, and we're missing Lee and Dreama, who are visiting with family, but they'll catch up with us on YouTube, and we're going to go ahead and pray and get started and discuss the last three chapters of C.S. Lewis' Great Divorce. So let's pray. Gracious and loving God, we thank you for the opportunity to gather. We thank you for this book that has allowed us to think about you and envision and dream and imagine some aspects of ourselves and what they might be like for us. We want to be mindful of Lee and Dreama. We pray for their safe travel and for your peace to abide with them as they visit with Dreama's brother. And we ask that you would be glorified in our conversation tonight, to the end that we might better live as your disciples in this world. It's through your Son, Jesus, we pray. Amen. So there's three chapters, but they really feel like two here at the end. At least to me, they felt like two, because 12 and 13 kind of go right into each other with the same interaction between characters. 12 starts us off with an experience of one of the bright people, but it's very different. I don't remember if we have her name or not, but a woman shows up with an entourage, and we haven't seen that yet. Apparently she was sort of a nobody on earth in her life, but yet everybody loved her, and she loved everybody as if they were family. And so she is somebody in this valley in the shadow of life. What were some of your thoughts as you read about her as the author introduces her to us?
I really liked this lady. It was something where I was like, I hope one day I can say this about myself, or someone else can say this about me. It was, I liked how MacDonald said that she made kids feel like they wanted her to be their mom, and men felt like they could be better to their wives. Not that they craved her, but that they wanted to be better because of her. And I really liked that.
So did I.
Yeah.
Just loved the way the birds and everything flowed with her. It was like the perfect Christian now after she'd been in heaven, and she'd reap the rewards of her life, and it's absolutely beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
I think, Jen, kind of like what you were saying, I think that's what sticks out to the character. But for me, it's the animals more than it is the children and the other people. It's every animal was one of hers, the squirrels and the dogs and the cats. And I know people like that. I'm not that, but I know people like that, where every stray dog was their pet. Every squirrel that happened to come to the bird feeder belonged there. It didn't rob the birds of the food, and so I imagine people like this easily because I know them. And I aspire to be that kind of person too. I think we all hope to be that sort of, have that effect in our neighborhoods and with the people around us. At least I would hope so. So let's talk about the other guy, the one she comes to greet, the small dwarfish fellow and the tall tragedian actor who is held by the chain to the dwarf. What are your thoughts on this character?
I didn't understand the old guy. I didn't understand what he was representing.
Okay.
Jen?
Well, I think MacDonald called him someone who had to do with pity, who thought pity as a way to kind of lord over other people. And maybe I'm saying that incorrectly, but that's the takeaway I got from that. To where he brought up how she used a last stamp, and he didn't get to write the letter he wanted to write. And I'm thinking, it's a stamp. They don't cost that much. I mean, even, and I would guess even around the time of World War II, when this is probably written in at least that era, I wouldn't think that stamps would be something that would be hard to come by. It's just like, just go get another one. But he was more concerned about people pitying him. And I think the word that they used was blackmail. He would blackmail other people. And I've actually met people before who used pity to get what they wanted. And it's not a kind person to be around. It's a manipulative person to be around. And they make you feel horrible about yourself because they use pity against you. And I just thought it was interesting that he was like that with her when everyone else loved her for who she was, and he missed out on who she truly was.
Yeah. I think one of the things for me about that character is he puts on a false persona. Oh, I'm the wounded human being. Oh, the world is always against me. And I think that's how he gets what he wants. I think manipulative is the right word. And I'm pretty sure blackmail is the word that we see in here at some point. And that's the concept behind his character, is one that will take offense to everything, but wouldn't let you know he's taking offense. He would harbor that offense in his heart and then bring it out at some other time. You remember that time when I let you have the last stamp? Well, I really wanted that stamp, and so you should give me what I want now. That kind of thing. And again, I've met these people. I've met this person. And when I'm not careful, this person is me, It's that I'm going to go sulk in the other room because I didn't get my way. And I'm going to get my way eventually, but I'm going to have someone come in and comfort me first. I'm not that way anymore. I don't know that I've ever really been that way, but there's a part of me that thinks, if I just did this, then they'd learn it. Then I'd get my way. Does that help you understand the character a little bit, Kathy, between what Jen and I've said?
Out of what you read. I don't understand how you get that all from what you read. Where does the blackmail come from? So I'm always lost, I'm getting it. It's interesting to hear you talking, which I've read it, and it just baffles me. But you have somehow kind of an insight, or you know people better. I never could understand people, I guess, maybe. I don't know. People can say, "Oh, that's a so and so type person."
Yeah.
That,
But
I don't know if that means anything, as to whether I could figure this out or not. But I thought maybe.
Well, and this is why we discuss things in a group, because other people are going to see and notice things from a different perspective than we do. That's why I think it's so helpful to have these kind of groups.
That's why I'm still here.
Yeah.
I can.
And so we see this interaction between the two of the characters, the woman who is radiant and just beaming joy and love and mercy, and the dwarf holding the tragedian. And there's a couple of times in there where it's almost like the dwarf begins to be real. Like there's a time in there where he starts to grow a little bit, or there starts to be some real emotion in that person, but he quickly stops. And I like how Lewis talks about it. He talks about it in the sense that it was not the dwarf's will. Like the light was affecting him, but it wasn't his choice.
What page?
I don't know, because I listened to it, so now I have to find it.
Okay.
Do you mean where it says our light can swallow up your darkness?
No, not yet. Not that part. It's not quite that far. There's a little more visible. It's, I want to say it's right after she laughs about, um, where he goes on and on saying something about uh, her lying dead on the floor.
Where he didn't, where she, something about where he's trying to say, "Didn't you miss me?" and "Don't you love me?" and
Yeah.
yeah.
It might be the next chapter, actually, now that I'm looking through this. I think it is the other the next chapter.
Mm.
Oh, no, here we go. It's going to be the very beginning of chapter 13. So that's what it is.
I was just curious. I wanted to follow along.
Yeah. Here we go. It's the first paragraph of chapter 13, right near the end. But the light that reached him against his will. This was not the meeting he'd pictured. He would not accept it. But it's talking about like her joy and mirth are impacting him in such a way. Like he smiles a little bit, he grows a little bit. It's almost like he begins to look a little solid and almost let go of the chain a little bit. But then he takes it all back because it wasn't his choice. His choice was to be the tragedian. His choice was not to accept that joy. And I thought that was really interesting because so much about this book is about choice. And I thought that was important for us to reflect on a little bit about how her joy can affect him, but ultimately her joy can't release him.
So he's chained to this Paul guy.
He's holding the chain. Like he refuses to let go of the chain to the actor ghost because that's who he
go and grow. She won't accept her forgiveness for some reason.
like he's not interested in forgiveness. The first thing she says to him is forgive me for all that I've done and all that I've left undone between us. He's only interested in his pain or his perceived pain, I guess. Because they talk about her sorrow in death while he enjoyed his nice long life. And she responds with, well, I wasn't sorry and it wasn't painful and I'm in love. And then he gets offended by that she wasn't pining away for him in heaven.
Yeah, he was upset.
Yeah. And then she says that she's in love and he gets upset about that you never really loved me. And her answer is, well, I kind of did in part, but not truly. And he takes offense at that too. And so I think it's what we're seeing here is a person who takes offense to all sorts of things and wants others to feel in the way that he expects them to feel, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I love this interaction. This is my favorite my favorite interaction of the book. Because I think it's rich with so many details.
Mm-hmm.
What do you all think about? I guess we can go back to that love part because I was getting us into chapter 13 too quickly, where I guess the difference between how he expected her to be in death while he was in life and how she really was in death, or at least in this dream, which we get to later. But
I guess I'm not understanding what you're asking.
I don't know what I'm asking either. I didn't write it down ahead of time. I'm just, I guess it's the difference between how we love in part and how we love in full, I guess is what I'm trying to get at, is
how she's in love now as opposed to how we are. Okay. I think the way I understand it is that while we're on earth, we're limited by what we can do and what we can truly experience until we do get to heaven and realize that God is love. And then by being in constant community with him, that we can't truly experience what love is like until we get there. That because we are fallen people and because we live on earth, the way that love was intended is a fraction of what it really is. And that's, I think, what she's trying to say to him. And he's just twisting her words and trying to make her pity him for being alone while she has been dead.
Yeah.
That's how I see it.
Yeah. I think another aspect of it too is there's a certain, I guess the way that I was understanding it is sort of that love is a spectrum between selfless and selfish, and we're always somewhere in that spectrum. Except it not in this space, she is at the selfless end of the spectrum completely and totally, because she's discovered what love is. And I think that he can't comprehend that.
Right.
Because of his limited willingness, I think is how I want to say that.
He won't let himself understand what she's trying to say. He's
right.
Locked her out.
Yeah. Because his response is love. Do you even know the meaning of the word? And so it's, yeah. And I think there's an aspect of neediness that we all have. We need other people. And sometimes it's not so much we need them we need them to be for us something. We don't need them to be them just to be them. And I think there's an aspect of that also in here. We can't really truly love someone to be who they are because we really need them in that moment to be what we need them to be. And she's like, I have no need. I don't need you. And I need you to be you, if I need you at all, kind of thing. And he hears that he's not needed, not wanted.
Yeah, I understood that part where he said, it would have been better if I'd seen her lying dead at my feet before I heard those words. I kind of understand that. I've had my heart broken before. And at the time, because it was so painful, it would have been better if that person had died than tell me they didn't love me anymore. So, I mean, I see what he's getting at. But at the same time, she comes and tells him, you saw me die. I was in a nursing home. I'm already dead, It's not that I'm telling you that before I died. He's again trying to turn it into something where she pities him for how he feels and how she's not being what he wants her to be. And I think she said, I don't remember where she said it, when we were talking about the blackmailing, where he did this with his sisters or someone in his family. Clearly he's been doing this since he learned how to do it when he was probably a child, and no one corrected him. They just said, oh, you poor thing, let me fix it. And he learned that he could control things by doing that.
Yeah, it's children will pick up quick, and unless someone teaches them otherwise, they use what they have to the best of their ability to accomplish their ends. And some people never grow up and grow out of those bad habits.
That is true.
Yeah, it's in chapter 13 where that exposition starts taking place. Stop using pity, other people's pity in the wrong way. I like the explanation that we get here Pity was meant to be a spur that drives joy to help misery, in the sense that pity is a good thing, but it can easily be manipulated and abused.
Mm-hmm.
In the sense, it's the thing that we see someone in suffering and we want to help. And so there's a part of us that is created that way. But there are people who use that and abuse that to their own ends.
Mm-hmm.
That's where it gets talked about blackmail.
Yeah, talking about how he would go up into the attic and sulk until one of his sisters would go and fix it.
Yeah. Yeah, it says, those who choose misery can hold joy up to ransom by pity.
Yep.
And that's when he begins to shrink into almost nothingness. Because he withdraws into that persona to such a degree that he loses his self. He loses the little glimmer of hope that he could have been. A fully formed being, I guess is the way I can say that. And the image the way that it's described is pretty amazing, where the tragedian just picks up the chain and swallows it.
Yeah.
No longer is the tragedian being controlled by something else. It's only the tragedian. There's no longer a person there. And that's when the lady gets up and walks away. There's no longer anything she can do. The choice has been made.
But the dwarf left go of the chain, didn't he?
Say that again, Kathy?
Did the dwarf let go of the chain?
No, he shrunk so much that he became like a little insect on the chain and then eventually became nothing.
I remember now. Thank you.
Yep. And then she goes away and and they're all singing and going along because nothing can steal her joy. Not even his sorry estate, I guess is how I'll say that.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where Lewis gets a little upset. And he responds with, is it really tolerable that she should be untouched by his misery, even his self-made misery? This is on page 135. And this is where we get into philosophy. And this is the philosophy, it's not the, but it's a very explicit bit of philosophy where pity and sorrow and joy and how they relate or don't relate. What in this section, what do you want to talk about in regards to this? The way that pity and joy relate to one another, or misery and joy, I guess might be the better way to say it.
I liked where MacDonald on the same page here at the end, where he says the demand of the loveless and the self-imprisoned that they should be allowed to blackmail the universe, that till they consent to be happy on their own terms, no one else shall taste joy, that there should be the final power, that hell should be able to veto heaven. Mm-hmm. I really liked the way that he put that. I feel like in the society that we have now, it's so easy to offend somebody. People take offense so quickly. And I see a lot of this, of the holding on to this like blackmail, that we're not allowed to be happy unless everyone is happy. and everyone can't all be happy on the same terms because we all have different things that drive us, and we're allowed to have different opinions and different ways of looking at the world. But to say that you can't be happy till I am is almost crazy, because not everything makes people happy in the same way.
Mhm.
So
No, everybody has different likes and dislikes and different joys and things like that. It would be a boring world if we were all exactly the same.
And I think that may be part of Lewis's point in this scene, is that there are those who would refuse happiness for anyone if they can't have their own way. I think that's the point in this scene, and that's why it gets explained here, saying that you can't have heaven as long as there's a hell. Because how could you possibly have joy when there is sorrow still in existence? Which is a really unsatisfactory answer, but it is at the same time a very logically consistent answer. That joy, unspeakable joy, can't be taken away or held hostage to sorrow and misery. Misery can't win.
Mhm.
Otherwise, there can't be joy, whether it's in an eternal sense or a temporal sense. And I love how Lewis writes himself as sort of the one who doesn't know what's going on here. He writes MacDonald as the one who's explaining it, and Lewis is just like, I don't know. I don't know what I want. I don't know what's going on. Please explain it to me. And then he goes and explains it some more in some more philosophical language, or maybe not philosophical, but he explains it a little bit. Oh, and so now we get to talk about the bus and the crack. Kathy, you mentioned before we started really recording that this was a really confusing group of readings for you. Is this one of those confusing parts, or did you kind of see what they were talking about with this crack in the dirt?
And I can't quite remember what that was.
Okay.
No, I think it's beyond that I couldn't quite catch.
Okay. Well,
I think the crack, I kind of got something. I can't remember exactly. I have to read it again.
That's okay. Because we're at the part now where Lewis goes to MacDonald and he says, "Can we just go back to the bus and go see? Did they go back to the bus? Where'd they go?" And MacDonald takes a blade of grass and he picks it and he points at the little tiny crack in the dirt, and he begins to explain that this crack might not be the one you came up out of, but it's about the right size. And then he goes on to talk about what's real and what's not real, or what's substantive and what's not substantive. And how the woman couldn't possibly go all the way back down to the gray town, to hell, because she wouldn't fit. What about this scene or this conversation did you find interesting, Jen? Or what stood out to you?
I like how Lewis said that it was a big gulf. For him it was this huge chasm that they traveled, and then how MacDonald explains how small it is and how people from where they are can't fit into it. And then he says only one has descended into hell.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think, and then Lewis says, will he ever do so again? And how time's different there. And he said, well, he did it not that long ago. It wasn't that long ago that he did it. It's kind of saying he doesn't really need to do it again.
Oh, you froze.
it's done at once.
Yeah. Actually, I hadn't thought about it this way until this time reading it. That what if the bus driver is Jesus? He's the only one of the solid people who can fit and go down. And so I don't know if Lewis meant that, but I was began to think about that. I'm like, that makes perfect sense. Jesus, the bus driver. Everyone who wants to get on the bus can get on the bus, and everybody who thinks about it somehow ends up on the bus at some point or another. And
get off again.
Yeah, they can get on, they can get off, and Jesus is happy to drive them back and forth. But to me, that would be so much like how I think of Jesus, and so it's
pretty good. Yeah.
I don't know if Lewis meant it that way, but I like that in my mind to be the case. So that for me, that's how I'm going to read it from here on out. Jesus, the bus driver.
Yes. It would make me feel good too to think that would be Jesus too. He would be happy, take anybody along. And he would come back and pick you up too if you got off and decided to get on again. Yeah. The only one that could fit.
Yeah.
He was the only one worthy.
That makes sense. Makes sense to me too. That with Jesus saying that He is the way, that the only way to get from the gray town to heaven is on the bus. So I mean,
there we go. You've all convinced me further. So
it's great. Yeah. I should read it over again, thinking that way, and knowing some things that I've learned through people talking. I might get a little more out of it. Mm-hmm. I still didn't understand, though, how you understood that lizard. And then I was thinking about it, something bad in you that you keep doing is actually because a lizard to me is a bad thing. I don't like lizards that much, So I'm thinking that it's something he couldn't he wanted to keep. But why would you want to keep something that ugly? Well, some people do, but in my mind. Mm-hmm. So bad things aren't bad and ugly like a lizard to me. And there's some things that you don't want to get rid of, even though they're not good. And that's kind of what I got out of that. I'm sorry, I'm going on.
No, that's fine. I think it's better to read something more than once. And I think it's very helpful for something like this, which is an allegory, to read and reflect on it at different points. Like I don't know how many times I've read this book, and I've never thought of Jesus as the bus driver until this week. So there's always new things to discover and reflect on. And I think part of it has to do with our own point of view and where we are when we're reading it.
Like reading the Bible.
There's about the size of hell. Where is it? All right, so it starts on 138. It says, all the loneliness, angers, hatreds, envies, itchings that it contains, if rolled into one single experience and put into the scale against the least moment of the joy that is felt by the least in heaven, would have no weight that could be registered at all. Bad cannot succeed even in being bad, as truly as good is good. So what I understand in that bit is the sense that no matter how bad everything is, it doesn't even begin to measure up to the amount of good that is really truly good. Or I guess saying it differently, everything feels super weighty and bad when things are bad, but they don't compare to good. I don't know. I feel like I'm getting preachy about this, so I'm going to stop. How do you all understand that?
I understood it as it being a much smaller entity than we think hell. much smaller than we think. Kind of like what you just said, it's
Mhm.
the good all outweighs bad. And I think that we've read that before.
Yeah. I can't find it at the moment, but I remember hearing it when I was listening to it, that all the bad things feel so much bigger and worse when you're in the midst of them. With the infinite abyss of the gray town and the cliffs, it all feels so much bigger when you're in the midst of it. But when you get out, it's nothing at all. And I'm trying to find where that is.
It says that all hell is it smaller than a pebble.
Yeah.
Earthly world. It's even smaller than one atom.
Right.
It's on 138 in the middle of the page. Yeah, it seems big enough when you're in it.
Mm-hmm.
You had all loneliness and all that you just read.
Well, I'm not going to find it tonight, apparently. So
138, middle of the page down. That's what you were reading?
yeah, it's somewhere around. Yeah, I think I know it. Yeah, there's the atom part that you're talking about. I must be imagining the other bit about how it feels so much bigger and scarier when you're in the midst of it.
Well, I think we mentioned that earlier, didn't we, when they were talking about the desert? And then when you were out of the desert, it was actually an oasis.
Yeah.
It was like in the middle of the book, I thought.
Yeah, my brain may be connecting those two pieces together.
It says here, all hell's miseries together entered the consciousness of you, wee yellow bird on the bough there, they would be swallowed up without trace, as if one drop of ink had been dropped into a great ocean, but your terrestrial Pacific self is only a molecule.
Yeah. It's beautiful language, isn't it?
She didn't get into hell.
Let's move on, because Tempus Fugit. I want to talk a little bit with us about, well, with you all, about the choice. MacDonald starts talking about it on page 140, talking about time and possibilities, and how the choice is always before us. What we'll choose. Will we choose God's? It's the thy will be done, or God says to the other, thy will be done. Now that's from a previous chapter, but that seems to be the choice he's reflecting on again here. And how time is what reveals that choice.
It's always before you, the choice.
Mm-hmm. And the way that freedom interacts with this. So let's talk about the choice. He talks about freedom, he talks about predestination, he talks about universalism in here a little bit. How do you all understand this piece of the chapter? Is there a part of that at all that's standing out? You're both rereading it, aren't you?
Yeah, there's a lot here. It's rather heady. I felt like, I did like the part where it said, "The Lord said we were gods. How long could ye bear to look without time's lens on the greatness of your own soul and the eternal reality of her choice?" Um, to me, that just puts so much on a person, not in a bad way, but I think a lot of times we can see ourselves as insignificant and unimportant, when in reality we have a lot of control over what we do and how we live our life, and ultimately it's up to how we want to do it. You know, what we do here matters and will matter on into eternity. It decides our fate, if you want to use that phrase. But we have a responsibility, I think, is what I take away from that.
Yeah. Kathy, any thoughts you want to share? Not right now. Okay. One of the things that I had, again, I hadn't put together until this reading is, and part of it is because I've come across some other readings that have shed some light on this for me, that the choice that we make within the 70 to 100 years, well, 0 to 100 years that we are alive and walking this earth. I guess I should say probably maybe 0 to 120. I don't know what the world record is for longevity of a lifespan, but for however it is we walk on this earth is incomparable to eternity. And so I think that's part of why I love this book so much, with the concept of the choice is ever before us, to make. Do we want to be with God, or do we want to be by ourselves, forever and ever alone? Or do we want to choose the things we hold on to, the pity, the pride, the all the different images we've seen throughout this book? Do we want to hold on to those, or we're willing to give them up for joy? And I guess that's part of what strikes me as I'm reading it this time through, is the grace of God that allows us that choice. And for those who, I think if it was a previous chapter, that the choice we make in the whatever our lifespan is on this terrestrial ball is where it is when it falls. I think that's kind of cruel to God, cruel from God. So as God's grace even after death, I think, is beautiful, the concept. Yeah, let's move on, because the last bit, I mean, it's only like 2 pages, but I think there's a lot to reflect on for us in these last 2 pages. I guess 3 pages. And suddenly all was changed. I saw a great assembly of gigantic forms, all motionless, all in deepest silence, standing forever about a little silver table and looking upon it. And then there's sort of the chess pieces moving around on the table. This is a very interesting, I find this a very interesting scene. What sticks with you about it, or what are some of your reflections on this last final scene before he wakes up?
It reminds me of like stories that you hear about people who have like near-death experiences and say they've visited heaven or they've seen glimpses of things, and it reminded me of that.
Yeah, like the sunrise, the bright light, I mean, that kind of thing, or just?
Well, like I think there was a book a while ago, and I can't remember what it's called. It's about this little boy who died in the hospital.
Yeah.
And I don't remember how long he was dead for, but he has this whole experience of going to heaven and meeting God and Jesus and seeing the end of time and seeing even Satan, and like that's what it reminded me of, that he's getting this glimpse of what is happening outside of the world.
Gotcha. Yeah, Heaven is for Real, by the way, is that book.
That's right. Yes. I knew heaven was in the title, but I couldn't remember the rest of it.
That table and everybody's sitting there looking at the table, that reminded of you of that?
Yes.
An interesting mind, I guess. I don't think it didn't make one bit of sense to me.
Okay.
So, it's really interesting to hear you talk, Ben. It's been a challenge.
Mm-hmm. So the paragraph that I think for me encapsulates this chapter is the first full paragraph on page 144. This is the voice of MacDonald, or you might not as well say, anticipations of a choice to be made at the end of all things. But you do better to say neither. You saw the choices a bit more clearly than you could see them on earth. The lens was clearer, but it was still seen through the lens. Do not ask of a vision in a dream more than a vision in a dream can give. And I think that part of why that's important to me is that I can see the choice being made in these characters. They're choosing to go back to the bus. They're choosing to go back to the gray town. It's very clear in this story. But this isn't the be all and end all of heaven and hell. This isn't the treatise on how it all really works out. This is just a vision and a dream and a fiction, and that's all it is. We can't ask of it more than what it is, which is C.S. Lewis's fiction about a bus that takes people from hell to heaven, or to the valley in the shadow of heaven, maybe is how we can put it.
And I think with it being a dream, I mean, because when we have dreams ourselves, it's like our self-conscious, I don't know how it works, but it's stuff that makes sense to us. And so I think with him describing it the way he's seeing it is because that's what makes sense to his brain.
Yeah. And the choices that we make, oftentimes, we love to believe that people change, and sometimes they do, but most of the time I'm not sure that they do. The choices that we make tend to be the same choices we make over and over again. Choices for pride, or choices for forgiveness and humility, or choices for pity and manipulation, or choices for freedom and love and joy. And I think that we see those choices a lot. Now in the church, we sometimes get to see people transformed and be completely different. But I think throughout most of our lives, we don't see a whole lot of change in people. Maybe I'm projecting that onto you all because your lives are different from mine, but I think that that is a relatively true statement, that we see the choices people make for themselves or for others, and we see that often enough throughout life.
I would say when it comes to change for myself personally, when I see something like, especially like in a book like this where they're pointing out a character and I say, I can see myself in that.
Yeah.
And especially if it's in a bad light, that's what causes me to want to change.
Mm-hmm.
Say, I don't want to be like that. I don't want someone to look at me and say, that's who that person is. And I think really that's the only time that you can change is when your flaws are pointed out to you in some kind of way. And you can say, either I want to continue to be like this or I don't.
Yeah. It's to use Jesus' words, when the speck is pointed out in our own eye, or the plank is pointed out in our own eye. And I would say for me, it depends on who's pointing that spec out or that plank out as to whether or not I'm likely to listen to them.
Oh,
Because some people may point something out and be like, yeah, that's not true. You really don't know what you're talking about. And some people will be like, oh, yeah, that's.
knows you know real well.
Mhm.
Well, I've changed.
Mhm.
I've changed a lot. I was very inferior. I didn't think anyone loved me.
Mhm.
But when I found out that God loved me, it changed everything.
Yeah.
It changed. As I felt loved, I could do more loving myself.
Mhm.
And of course, I'm still growing. You
Yeah.
know, I'm, you're never done. But I see things in the book where I could take notice of,
Yeah.
and do a few things of changing.
Mhm.
And I have. So, uh, yeah, I think the book does point things out to people. And that's a good thing.
Yeah. So I want to spend the last of our time, and this isn't, I really wish more people were able to participate in this part, but what sticks with you from this book? I mean, we spent several weeks reading this book, a couple chapters a week. What's sticking with you today about the whole book, or what are you glad about that we've read it for? That's not how I should ask a question. What makes you glad that you spent time reading this book? Is what the question I wanted to ask was.
I think what I liked the most about with the book was that we kept meeting people who were very real and had very real things that they weren't willing to give up. And each time it wasn't that it was a hard thing that the solid people would ask them to do. It was just, you have to give yourself over.
Mm-hmm.
You have to give this up, which I think we hear a lot as Christians. You have to give yourself over. You have to die to this. You have to give it up. You have to get rid of your lizard, and it's always just, usually it's just one thing that is keeping you between, like building up this wall. And it's just, if you just allow the wall to be torn down, how different your life could be. I just like the perspective of that, because there were so many different people. Mm-hmm. And people that were like, C.S. Lewis probably knew somebody like that, but we all knew somebody like that too. Especially with like this last one with the man that used pity. I know people like that. They're not pleasant people to be around, and they're very manipulative, and they've made me do things I didn't want to do and didn't even realize until I was no longer around those people anymore, But,
yeah,
that was very insightful. I enjoyed reading it.
Good. Kathy?
It's a challenge for me. Mm-hmm. Yes, I've learned things from it, and I love the way that God lets us choose and how he loves us no matter what we choose. Mm-hmm. But he would rather we choose him, of course. But I've learned some things from this, and there are some hard things to change. Mm-hmm. You can ask for his help, and he'll help you with that. Yeah. And I'm glad I kept up with it. When I first started, I thought, well, it's just too hard to understand. I still don't understand a lot of it, but I got enough out of it to make it worthwhile. Yeah. And thank you very much.
Yeah. Oh, no, thank you. It would have been really boring talking to myself the whole time. But I think for me, this reading, what's standing out to me is what I mentioned earlier tonight is thinking of Jesus as the bus driver, as the one who goes down and makes sure anybody who wants to is able to encounter God and encounter space with God. And I think that I like that image for this book, and just in general, is that Jesus is the mechanism of God's grace to everybody. And so, yeah, that's it for me. Well, thank you all for being on this journey with me and for tonight. And I'm sorry Lee and Dreama missed it tonight. So, but that we'll see them again and we can ask them what they thought of it. And so those of you who are joining us from YouTube and haven't actually been able to be a part of the discussion, thanks for joining us. And let me say a prayer as we close. So let's pray. God, thank you for this journey. Thank you for your grace and for the insights you give into each of us about you through this book. Thank you for the insights you've given us about ourselves also through this book. Continue to minister to us your grace and send us people from your bright land to walk with us and teach us that we can lean on until we become a little more solid ourselves, so that we may better experience your presence and celebrate you in full joy. As we go forth, I want to just ask your blessing on each person who encounters us through this study. Be glorified in and through us all. And through your Son, Jesus, we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. And God bless you until I see you again.
And you too. God bless.
Bye.